Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. And good evening once again, and welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And she is the always lovely, she is the mystical, she is the mysterious Lynn Nickerson. Good evening.
Good evening, Willie. That's so sweet of you.
Oh, it's just because I'm just a sweet guy, you know?
It has something to do with it.
Yeah.
So how was your Christmas Day parade today?
Well, I was just going to say, we missed you today.
I know, I couldn't make it.
Yeah, Spirit Chasers Paranormal was invited to participate in the Hampton Christmas Parade.
And a great time was had by all, I hear.
A great time was had by all. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you weren't able to make it. But
next time.
Yeah, next year. You know, that's one thing about Christmas. It comes every year.
Yeah, so. You can depend on it.
so you got another chance at it. All right. Well, let's see. This week on Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, we welcome to the show Robert L. Snow. Robert served for 38 years on the Indianapolis Police Department, retiring in 2007 at the rank of captain. He has written 17 books and published articles in such magazines as Playboy, Reader's Digest, and Saint Detectives magazine. As a veteran police detective, Robert was devoted to evidence and hard facts. He had never given any thought to reincarnation, but during a hypnotic regression, he experienced a vivid awareness of being alive in 3 separate historical scenes. So in his new book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the story of a police detective's reincarnation, Robert begins to investigate with the intention of disproving reincarnation, but instead, diligent research and corroboration from multiple sources reveal solid evidence that he lived a former life as Carol Beckwith, a 19th century American artist. And so now, shall we welcome to Spirit Radio, Robert Snow. Good evening, Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Good evening. Good evening.
How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on.
Well, we certainly enjoyed your book. It was very interesting. It's really riveting. It's kind of hard convincing other people of some, outlandish ideas, what some people perceive as being outlandish. How did you deal with that?
I didn't, truthfully, I didn't really worry about that. I simply presented the facts and let people decide what they wanted on the facts. I really didn't try to persuade people or people believe it or not. I just basically lay out, here's what I found.
Right. And it took you a long time, though, to decide to come out with it, though, didn't it?
It did. I sat on it for several years. Even after I'd finished my investigation, which took several years, it was a 2-year investigation. Even after I finished it, I still sat on this for several years, only because this is not something a police captain really comes out and talks about.
Right,
it's not something that's done. And so I was really worried about what would happen if I came out with this.
Yeah, I would have been concerned, too. Just in regular society, people are slow to adopt these kind of ideas, for the most part.
Very much, yeah, very much so.
Well, what I loved about this story is your honesty when confronted with these experiences that ignited your skepticism. Now, even though at the first it didn't fit into your belief system, you didn't entirely dismiss the possibility of reincarnation, and you went after it like a pit bull. And you uncovered as much as you could about Carol Beckwith as possible, and the fact that you had to dig so deep to find the relevance really increases the likelihood that the hypnosis sessions were not a product of your imagination. I just thought that was so cool. You kept at it, and then you started coming up with these different facts. So
when I started the investigation, I really wasn't trying to prove reincarnation. I was actually trying to do the opposite.
Disprove it,
I
yeah.
had this regression, and it had been so vivid and so lifelike that it really bothered me. And I was trying to convince myself that was simply my subconscious mind during the hypnotic session that had just brought up old memories in this life.
Yeah.
You ordered them to look like a past life. My original intention when I began this investigation was to prove that's all it was. There was nothing supernatural. This was not a past thing. This was simply a trick my subconscious mind was playing on me.
Yeah, basically, you didn't want to believe it in the first place, right?
Well, the point of the matter is, if you accept it, you have to change your whole worldview.
Exactly.
You have to change everything you've believed in your whole life. You have to reorder everything. And I certainly wasn't willing to do that, not unless I had a lot of proof. I wasn't willing to do that just on things I had seen.
On a whim, yeah.
While I was under hypnosis. I wanted real proof before I could do that.
So this all began with a dare from Kathy Graben. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yeah, Kathy
at a
is
party.
She's a police detective, but she's also a practicing psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I had read a book earlier called Coming Back by Dr. Raymond Moody, and it was basically involved past life regression.
Mm-hmm.
And I had read it, and I thought it was interesting, but I didn't believe it. Even he, at the end of his book, he basically what happened, he had a friend who was a psychologist who did past life regression, and she talked him into being hypnotically regressed, and he talked about what he saw, these 8 lives he went to. But at the end of the book, he basically said, gee, I don't really know what this was. I'm not really sure it was anything but my imagination. That's kind of how I felt. And when I was talking to her at a party, I didn't realize at the time that she used past life regression in her practice.
When you were talking to her?
We were just making small talk at a party, and I mentioned something. We mentioned movies we'd seen. I mentioned books. I happened to mention this book to her, and she asked me what I thought about it, and I kind of belittled the idea of it. I told her I thought it was kind of silly. That was basically just your subconscious mind bringing up old memories from this life. And I kind of went overboard a little bit in belittling that. And she ended up basically daring me to try it myself.
Oh. So when you met Dr. Griffith and you sat down and she started, relaxing you and you started going into the trance, you felt like it was kind of, as you mentioned, her daydream and not yours. It all just seemed like almost a game, didn't it?
Yeah, I didn't really tell you the truth. I really didn't want to do this. She dared me that night to do it, and I basically took the dare. But later on, I really didn't want to do this. The next day, I thought, I'm not doing this. This is silly. And I probably wouldn't have, but it seemed like every time I'd run into Kathy,
she'd ask
me, have you made the appointments yet? Because I had told her I'd make an appointment with a friend of hers to have it done. And every time I'd see her, I'd make some kind of excuse about, well, I was busy, I was doing this, I couldn't. But she's like, Lord, it's like every day I'd book her on there, she would. There she was. And I knew I'd have to make another excuse. So finally, I just went ahead and just made the appointment just to get it over with. I was tired of making excuses. But when I went to Dr. Griffith, I really didn't think anything had happened. Number one, I didn't think I could be hypnotized. I thought I was too strong.
I felt the same way.
Even if she could, I didn't believe anything about past lives would come out because I didn't believe there was such a thing.
Well, what was the breaking point? I know that she had you envision walking down 12 stone steps into a valley. But what do you think happened to you, mentally, your perception? What was it that changed?
Well, because before this, she had had me do a lot of visualization for her. For example, she told me, take me to your college graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what happened. And I described it all to her. And she'd have me describe things in a lot of visual details to her. And I don't know if that's what set it up or what. But after she had me walk down these steps into a valley, it was just like I walked through a door. And I knew what it was. I mean, even though it was really bizarre, I knew I was being hypnotized. I realized all of a sudden I found myself in a valley.
But it does make you wonder what triggered that vivid
scene.
I have
no idea. Not being an expert in hypnotism or psychology, that psychology of hypnotism, I really don't know. But it's like it's suddenly like a switch turned on, and all of a sudden I was in a valley. But the point was, even though I could see myself in a valley, it was vividly clear, as clear as real life. I also knew I was in the office with Dr. Griffith. I could feel the couch underneath me. I could hear her moving the chair. But at the same time, I was in the valley, and I knew at the moment what it was. I said, this is my subconscious mind. I've been hypnotized. It was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty
Duality.
It was kind of like finding the best ride you'd ever seen at an amusement park. I mean, it really feels real, and it looks real, but you know in reality it's not. So, and that's what I thought about this one. I thought at the moment, I thought, this looks real, it feels real, it's just your mind playing tricks on you through the hypnotism.
Oh, that must have been one heck of an experience. Okay, so you get to the valley, and tell us what happened.
Well, I again, I said, it just happened all of a sudden, and I was stunned. But she asked me, she says, okay, she said, look down and describe yourself. I looked down, and I could see a couple of real gnarly-looking hairy legs. I was wearing fur. And in one left hand, I was carrying a piece of tree limb. Now, I thought myself, I could say I was a caveman. But I thought, Bob, this is silly. Everybody's seen movies and TV programs. They know what a caveman looks like. This is all this is. You're just imagining this. This is just coming out of your subconscious minds of a movie you've seen or a TV program. That's all it is. You're not really here.
Just a forgotten memory, but it's not. Well, from another lifetime, perhaps.
Well, I didn't know, but it's kind of funny because all of a sudden it was like there was a part of my mind that was controlling things that I didn't know about. It was like my subconscious mind kept sending these little things, and I'd say things before I knew I was going to say them. They just kind of spilled my lips before I said it because when I was in this bayou in the valley, I looked up on the side of the valley, and there was a rocky outcropping. I told Dr. Griffin, this is where I live. And I knew there's a cave up there, even though Bob Snow sure didn't know this, but the person, the body I was in knew it. And I would say these things just suddenly without realizing, and I'd always think, gee, I wonder why I said that. But I'd just blurt these things out without thinking about them.
It's got to be a really strange feeling.
Oh, it's got to be a weird experience.
To just kind of know it, but you don't know it, you know.
Yeah, it was strange. But again, I didn't think anything at the time. I didn't think there was nothing. This was nothing supernatural or otherworldly. This was just hypnosis playing tricks on my mind. All it was.
Okay, so she brought you forward in time to your death. Was there much that you covered before that point that you might have left out of the book?
Well, no. We basically, I just kept. I could say the funny thing. It was like a dream, but not like a dream, because in a dream, your attention is drawn by whatever the plot of your dream is.
Yeah.
In this case, nothing was happening. I could just look around the valley. But the interesting part about the dream about the regression was that I could not only see and hear, I could feel. There was a breeze blowing in my face. I could see the leaves moving on the trees.
Oh,
I could
that's
feel the breeze in
bizarre.
my face. At the moment, I thought, well, this is the air conditioning in her office. That's all it is. But interesting enough, when she had me entered the cave where I lived, all of a sudden, I had this really disgusting smell.
You could smell yourself.
Obviously, did not practice good hygiene, and I thought how bizarre that was at the moment. I mean, wherever that smell come from, it was the smell of a person who hadn't practiced good hygiene for years.
Oh, that's amazing.
I thought that was kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
But anyway, she took me. She said, "I want you to go to your death." So maybe 3 or 4 seconds, I'd go into between scenes. I'd go into like a gray fog, and then suddenly I found myself. I wasn't in the body any longer. I was floating about 10 feet above it, and I could see a skinny little man laying on the floor of the cave. He was covered by furs and was coughing and shivering. And he just hacking and coughed something terrible. I could tell he was really sick, and that was me.
So you kind of left the body before the body died.
Yes.
Wow.
So then she told me to go out of the cave and go into the light. So I go out of the cave, and there's a big light over top the valley, bright light. But before I did it, again, I started talking. I didn't know I was going to say it. And I told Dr. Griffin, I said, this is a bad life. I said, I was supposed to learn how it was to be totally alone this life. I didn't have anyone this life. I was totally alone. It was a bad life. And again, I didn't know I was going to say this. It just always caught me by surprise. And
popped
kind of blurted out.
Oh. And then you went into another life. Was that, is the artist or the Greek girl?
Well, no, actually, at this time, Dr. Griffin told me, he says, okay, he says, go into the light. I want you to go to a life where you had someone. Go into a life where you had someone important to you. And so I went into the light, and it was about, again, 3 or 4 minutes of like gray fog. Then suddenly I found myself on a street. I was walking down a city street. But I could tell it wasn't today because there were gas lights and horse-drawn carriages. I could tell it was from like the late 1800s, early 1900s. I didn't know where it was. I just knew it was a big city. But the funny part was, it was a very sunny day. I could feel the sun beating down on me, which was really strange because I was sitting in a closed, darkened office. But I could feel the sun beating down on me. And so Dr. Griffin asked me, says, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to meet a woman. And she said, okay. So I went and met this woman. She said, where do you go? We went to a sidewalk cafe. And she said, what do you order? I said, the woman ordered some kind of special water. I ordered a glass of wine. Even at that moment, I remember thinking that even at that moment, how odd that was. Because I was under the impression men in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they drank whiskey. I didn't think men
drank wine.
Men drank wine. I thought that was kind of odd.
Yeah.
I told her I'd drink a glass of wine.
And this
so
was.
Then she said, okay. She said, go 5 years forward in your time and everything. So the next scene I saw myself, I'm in a hallway of an apartment, and I'm having an argument with a woman who I tell Dr. Griffith is my wife, and we're having some kind of argument. And I just turn and walk away, and I walk down the hallway into another room, and it's an artist studio. There's the whole roof is skylight, and one wall is all windows, and there are just dozens and dozens of paintings everywhere. And again, I didn't know this. Bob Snow didn't know this, but the person whose body I was inside at the moment knew that I was an artist, and this is where I worked. And I told Dr. Griffith, this is where I work. I'm a painter. I paint portraits. So I told her I hate painting portraits. I hate it, but I need the money. And so Dr. Griffith,
it pays
we
the
went
bills.
through this scene and everything, and Dr. Griffith, again, took me to my death.
Uh-huh.
And I saw myself, as I saw myself dying, I saw myself rising up out of the body and passing through a ceiling. And at the moment, I thought how funny, kind of strange it was. But again, I've seen movies about ghosts. Everybody's seen movies about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
They can go through walls and stuff. So again, I didn't think anything strange. So she had me rise up. But it's funny, so I rose up through the roof of this building I was in, and I was over a city. It was nighttime. It was a huge city. There was lights for miles in all directions. So Dr. Griffith told me, he says, okay, now, what did you regret about this life? And I told her I regretted we couldn't have children. I said, my wife and I wanted children, but we couldn't because she couldn't have children. She said, okay, now go into the light. But it's funny because people get the impression when you're under hypnotism that you're under control of the hypnotist. You're really not. You know what's going on. You're really in control yourself. Because Dr. Griffith told me to go into the light, and I didn't. Instead, I saw myself flying through some woods, and I could tell it was a late fall. I could see that it was kind of a cold, brisk night, but the trees still had leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next scene, I'm on the second or third floor of this big mansion. I'm looking in the window.
That's
There's nobody in the
strange.
room. There's a big fire in the fireplace. There's a painting over the top of the fireplace. It's a still life of a bottle and fruit and a big sun behind it. And I tell Dr. Griffith I wanted to see one more of my paintings one more time before I left Earth. So anyway, so then after that I did go into. After that after I looked at the painting for a while, I went to the light, and then Dr. Griffith told me, he says, well, so now I want you to go to the life when you were a woman. And I remember thinking at the moment, yeah, that's going to happen. I thought at the moment, I thought this would be the real clincher. This would prove that this is all a bunch of baloney. Because, I mean, how could I have subconscious memories of being a woman?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. So I thought it wasn't going to work. I thought, well, it'd be interesting. I said, this ought to disprove the past life regression. And so, again, you go into a kind of a gray fog for a few seconds, and sure enough, I'm in another body. And when I look down, I can see it's a woman's body. I remember thinking at the moment, this is really this is getting strange now. This is really strange. This was a young girl back in ancient Greece, and I worked at a temple in ancient Greece, bringing things down to the temple and all. So, Dr. Griffith, we went through this life again about all these things. And interesting enough, at the end of this person's life, she asked me how I died, and this woman died. She went to a village where they did mostly fishing, and she got herself caught in nets and was drowning. It was funny. It was a really kind of a scary situation. I could feel myself choking, and I could taste salt water.
That's amazing.
And I thought how bizarre that was, that I could taste salt water. So anyway, after we got this life, Dr. Griffith told me, he says, okay, he said, I want you to go back to your most previous past life. Go back to the life you were before you were Bob Snow. And so again, I went through a few minutes of fog, and I'll go back, and I'm in the artist's body again. I realized it's the same person I was into the time before the Greek girl. And I realized, but that's interesting. At the moment, I'm in my studio, and I'm painting a portrait. And very enough, it's a portrait of a woman with a hunchback, which at the moment I thought was kind of bizarre, because the woman had a really bad deformity of her, had a real bad hunch on the back.
Yeah.
But I'm painting her portrait, and I could see the portrait was just about done. But the interesting part about it, again, the regression was so vivid and so clear, I could see every single brush stroke in that painting.
That's
And
incredible.
I could see I was just putting the final touches on it. And I thought how really strange that was.
And she was in this.
Dr. Griffith had me go through several more situations, several more instances. She'd always tell me to go 5 years ahead and tell her what happened. I went through and told her about some things. I saw myself in a big garden somewhere, and I was all depressed about something. I was walking through the garden. I saw myself having an argument with somebody about one of my paintings that I thought the light wasn't good for one of my paintings on display and all. But anyway, so finally one time she tells me, okay, go 5 more years. So I'm going in the gray fog in between. All of a sudden, again, this voice comes from where I don't know. And all of a sudden I blurred out, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. At the moment, I had absolutely no idea who I was talking about. But I just knew that whoever it was a woman that was very, very important to this man because I wanted to cry. I felt so emotional. I wanted to cry. I kept saying she died of a blood clot. Well, I had brought my own tape recorder along. Dr. Griffith told me I could bring my own tape recorder along, and I wanted to do that anyway so that I could prove that absolutely nothing happened in this session. I could prove how phony all this stuff was. But at that moment, it clicked off. The hour's up. I opened my eyes, and that was it. The session was over.
And how long had it been?
An hour. I had an hour. It had been an hour tape. It was an hour-long tape.
Bob, if we could just a minute back up, I wanted to ask you, before we get into the artist a bit more deeply, the Greek girl, did you do any kind of research as to if in ancient Greek culture that young women tended the altars?
You know, I thought about doing research on this, but what could you really prove? I mean, what could you really prove? There's not enough records about individuals.
No, not about individuals.
In ancient Greece to really know. It was like the caveman thing. It was all interesting. It was all very interesting.
Right.
The Greek girl was, but
couldn't
so
verify
far
that.
back in history, there are no real individual records or nothing you couldn't say. Yeah, this proves this or this.
No.
This.
So you just concentrated on the one life that you could find some
and later
proof
on, I concentrated on the artist because he was recent enough. I could tell it was the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was recent enough that there could be records of him.
But had you not looked at Greek history to see if women did tend altars?
Yes, they did.
They did. Okay.
Yes, they did. I did look that much. Yes.
Yes.
They did do jobs like they did do jobs like I described her doing. But that again, did that mean anything?
No, not for verifying.
My point is, could I read that in school somewhere or something?
Correct.
Could that have been how I knew about that? So I didn't really consider that any kind of proof because that information is too readily available for people.
What I find interesting about you relating, for instance, the situation with the blood clot, you blurted it out and you didn't know where it was coming from. It was out of context, but part of your consciousness knew about it. It must have been a strange experience, experiencing that dichotomy. Two different polarities.
I had no idea who this person was talking about, but I felt all choked up like I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
So I knew who this woman was. She had been supremely important to this person, who everybody I was in. This woman who had died of blood clot had been incredibly important to her.
And the Greek girl, didn't Dr. Griffith ask you the purpose of that lifetime? Because she had a daughter.
Yeah, yes. Interesting enough, after I had this regression, I did a little research on past life regression, and I found that people often see people from their present life
True.
in past life regression.
Yeah.
And I saw a person from my present life in a past life, and this what happened is the Greek girl I was, you had to be a virgin to work at this temple where I was at. Well, unfortunately, apparently, I violated that rule because the next time I saw myself with I had a
child,
daughter,
and
so the temple had given me away. But the daughter, interesting enough, turned out to be my stepdaughter from my present life.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the age she was when I went to regression. She was the age she was when I married her mother. And she was my daughter in the Greek woman's life.
So it's not that she looked like your stepdaughter, but it was her personality and her soul that you recognized, right?
It seemed it was her. I mean, I knew what you looked at her, you knew exactly. When I looked at her, I knew exactly who it was.
That's interesting. Okay, so you wound up abandoning your daughter, right?
Yeah, well,
in that
what happened, this woman, they either gave her or sold her to this man, but he was very old and he died pretty quickly after she went with him. And so here she was now with this young girl. And so she went back to the temple and basically gave the little girl to the temple to work at the temple like she had. And I remember at the time it was funny because I kept trying, it was like I was trying to justify Dr. Griffith what I was doing, like it was really okay. But this person the person the body I was in knew what I was really doing. I was abandoning her because it'd be easier for me to make it through life without this little girl. And so I knew I was really abandoning her at this temple. Now, basically, I left her there to be raised by the people who ran the temple, so she'd work there, and I took off.
Wow, what a struggle. What an inner struggle for you to have to realize that.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember at the end of that life, I was so glad to go to that life because I had this terrible feelings of guilt. I had this terrible guilt feeling about abandoning my daughter. And I was so happy when Dr. Griffith asked me to go to another life. But I had this terrible guilt. And I remember at the time thinking how foolish this was. This is stupid, Bob. This is just a dream your subconscious mind's bringing up. This is not true. But I couldn't help it. I had this terrible feeling of guilt about abandoning her.
I think the hallmark of it being real is your emotional reaction to it. It was affecting you viscerally. Don't you think?
Very much so.
A good indication that perhaps there was something to it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Again, it's one of the things I just don't know.
Yeah.
But my problem about a lot of the things that happen to me is a lot of things seem to have some theological and philosophical implications, and that's not really my area. My area was police work. I was a police officer for 38 years, and my job was investigation. And so
Facts.
I'm really not trained in theology or philosophy, so people ask me a lot of times about the deep philosophical and theological implications, and that's beyond my field.
My opinion is it's more spiritual than anything, more than theology, it seems to be so bogged down in dogma, and sometimes it loses the spiritual aspect of things. And I think if you purely look at something spiritually, I think you'll find a lot more answers. Bob, we are at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. We're talking to Robert L. Snow, author of Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so please don't go anywhere. Supernatural Magazine, the UK's newest paranormal magazine, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You're listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, West End. And from the community calendar, the New Hampshire Art Association is one of the oldest statewide artists associations in the country. In Portsmouth, the group operates the Robert Lincoln Levy Gallery, located at 136 State Street. The gallery hosts a variety of art shows throughout the year, and all shows are free and open to the public. Gallery hours are Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sunday from noon to 4 p.m. Additional information can be found online at nhartassociation.org. And Lynn, you have some upcoming guests for us.
Yes, our upcoming guest list starts with December 12th, where Bob and Betty Luca are returning to continue our discussion from October 10th about their abduction experiences as chronicled in the 5 books by Raymond E. Fowler. December 19th, we're welcoming Alex Matsuo. She's an actress and an author of 3 books, and she'll be joining us to discuss her latest release, which is titled The Haunting of the 10th Avenue Theater. December 26th, we're taking off for Christmas. January 2nd, Willie and I are going to be discussing maritime mysteries and haunted ships. January 9th, Jeremy D'Entremont is returning to our studio once again to discuss his latest trip to the West Coast, while he was visiting all of the West Coast lighthouses out there. He's writing a book on that. Jeremy's both a photographer and an author of guidebooks and various New England histories, most of which focus on lighthouses and their associated ghosts. And January 16th, Valerie LaFazzo and Mike Stevens will be in the studio, and they're very good friends of ours, and they are founders of the Seacoast Saucers, which is a group where people can go and air their personal concerns of UFO experiences or sightings. And the 23rd of January, Andy Kitt, author and founder of the Kitt Research Institute in nearby Stratham, New Hampshire, will be in the studio to talk about the new program schedule at the Institute, which includes upcoming speakers and various workshops. And that's our upcoming guest list.
All right, so now let's go back to the phone for tonight's guest, Robert Snow, author of Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. Welcome back, Robert.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Bob, after you finished your session with Dr. Griffith for the first time, you left the building in disbelief, and you went and you sat in your car, and you mulled it over, and then you went home, but it took you a while, didn't it, to discuss it with your wife?
Yeah, I didn't discuss it for several months, to tell you the truth. What happened, I actually, after the session was over, I was kind of embarrassed to say, because I had gone in there very positive, and all this is all, just a bunch of foolishness. And I'd sit there and babbled for the last 45 minutes, about this past life stuff. And I didn't know what to make of it at the moment. I was really confused and really. The problem that bothered me, it was just so clear. It was just like so clear, vivid as real life. I mean, when I saw the paintings, I could see every brushstroke in the painting, every single brushstroke.
And you saw it in color, right?
Yeah. And it really bothered me. And so I sat in the car for a while thinking about it, trying to figure out, what does this mean? And I kept trying to convince myself this is nothing. This is just subconscious memories from this life brought up and reordered to look like a story. There's nothing to it. There's nothing true. And I kept trying to tell myself that, but I couldn't. I just couldn't seem to not think about it. Anyway, for the next couple of weeks, probably, I would think about it constantly. Every day, think about it dozens of times. And it's interesting, for the first couple of years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see the scenes. I could see the paintings. I could see every brush stroke in the paintings. I could see everything clear. And that really bothered me because it was so vivid and so clear.
Oh, all right. So during that period, before you told your wife about it, had you begun your research?
Well, I tell you, it started bothering me so much. I could feel that I was becoming obsessed by this.
Yeah.
As a police officer, I'd see what happens to people who are obsessed. It very seldom turns out well. And I could see I was becoming obsessed. I would think about the regression. I'd think about them constantly. So what I decided to do, finally, I said, okay, what I need to do, I need to find one of these two paintings. If I find the painting of the hunchback woman or the still life, all of a sudden, wow, it'll come to me. Well, oh, yeah, that's where I saw that. I saw it, 6 years ago at this place. There was a little blurb about the artist, and that's how I do this stuff. Mm-hmm. I felt positive. That's why I do these paintings from. I thought they're paintings I've seen somewhere in this life. So if I could find them, then it would come back to me. So I made a plan. I thought what I would do, I would go to the public library. These were pre-internet. This was the early 1990s. Mm-hmm. So this is pre-internet days. In those days, if you want to do research, you actually had to go to the library and pull books off the shelf. You couldn't just type a search engine in. You actually had to do the work yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I thought I'd go to the library and start thumbing through their art books till I found one of the paintings. I mean, come on, how many paintings of hunchback women could there be? I thought it ought to be really easy to find this. So I went to the public library, but unfortunately I didn't realize until I got there, because I've never been much of a student of art or know anything much about art. I never studied art or was any kind of aficionado of art or anything, so I didn't know much about it. When I got there, I found that the public library had hundreds of art books. So it took me several months of going there on lunch hour, on weekends, thumbing through these books before I could actually go through all the books looking for the paintings.
Didn't you get discouraged?
But I didn't find them. I didn't find either painting. And I thought how strange that was, because I figured they had to be at least semi-famous paintings, or I would never have known about them. Because again, I'm not an art student or an art fan or anything. So I thought I couldn't believe it. So I even started going to bookstores right in Indianapolis who would have art books that the library didn't, and started going through art books at bookstores.
And at this point,
I decided. I thought, well, maybe, okay, if you can't find that, maybe I'd talk to some art dealers around Indianapolis. I mean, come on, painting a hunchback woman, that ought to be pretty, significant. It ought to be pretty individual. And I wouldn't think there'd be many of them. So I started talking to various art gallery owners around Indianapolis, trying to find a painting. But no one knew it. Nobody knew about the painting or knew where it was or heard of it.
And you didn't have the name yet, right? You didn't have an artist's name.
No,
Maybe
I didn't have
just Jack.
I had the name of the artist, didn't have the name of the painting. I could simply describe the painting to them. That was it. Now, and unfortunately, and this is again pre-internet days. And I found in those days there was no central registry of paintings anywhere. There was nowhere you could go find a list. And
Right.
Find where these paintings would be at. The only way you could find where paintings were is you had to start calling art dealers and see if they knew.
That's a crapshoot. So, tell us about your trip to New Orleans.
Well, finally, what happened? I finally had to give up. I put several months into this, into going to the library, talking to art dealers, going to the bookstores. I've been to about 2 or 3 months in it. So finally, I had to give up. Because in Indianapolis, I was in charge of the homicide branch there for 6 years, and we had a 83% clearance rate, which is remarkable for a city our size. But that still means 17% of murders go unsolved. I mean, every year, 17% of murders get away with it. It's not going to be solved. And I thought, this is a case that's just not going to be solved. There's not enough evidence. There's not enough evidence to go on. I thought I'm going to have to let the case go. I'm going to forget about it. And I thought I'd just forget about it. So I tried, but it wasn't much. I didn't have much luck. But anyway, a couple months later, it was coming around my wife's and my anniversary, and we wanted to go somewhere Neil's never been. So she called me one day at work and says, "What do you think about going to New Orleans?" I thought, well, that sounds like fun. I'd never been to New Orleans. She hadn't either. And so we booked a trip for New Orleans for our anniversary. And we went down there. We had a great time. She went to all these visits. She's a big history buff wife, and we visited a lot of historical sites. And at nighttime, we go down to the French Quarter and listen to the bands and go to the bars and everything.
And it's just a fun town, isn't it?
Every night going to the French Quarter, that there are a lot of really neat shops in the French Quarter, but they're always closed when we were going because we were going late at night. And so the last day in New Orleans, we had our plane didn't leave till the evening, so we had a day left in New Orleans. I suggested we go window shopping in the French Quarter. And so we did. We visited antique stores and historic memorabilia stores, but we finally got to Royal Street. And at this time, Royal Street was all art galleries. And so we started walking through the art galleries. They had the first one we went through were some big ones, had some beautiful paintings by well-known artists. I noticed as we walked down the street, they became less and less well-known. The artists became more and more obscure. The galleries got smaller. So we walked down the street. We finally got this gallery at the end of the street. They walk in. It's a two-story, and there's a sign that said Modern Art, second floor. So the wife went to the second floor, and I never cared for modern art. So I'm walking along the first floor just looking at the paintings. I don't recognize any of the paintings. I don't recognize any of the artists, but I'm just walking along looking. I get to the corner, and there's a portrait down on the easel, and I just glanced at it and walked on. It was like I walked into a glass wall. I stopped, and suddenly I turned around. It was the portrait of the hunchback woman.
Unbelievable.
Well, as a police officer, I've been a police officer for 38 years, and let me tell you something. There's been a lot of scary situations. There have been a lot of situations where I'm scared. But the thing about being a scared police officer, you still know what to do because you've been in situations often enough. You know what the correct response is, what you should do, what the person's liable to do.
Yeah.
But in this situation, I had no idea what to do. I mean, I was so stunned, so shaken up. I didn't know what to do.
Were your knees weak?
I had no experience, no training, nothing to deal with this. And I just stood and stared at the painting for a long time. And at first, I tried to convince myself, no, this is not the painting. It looks like it. It's close, but it's not it. But again, I closed my eyes. At that time, I could still see the painting vividly. And I closed my eyes and opened them. I know, no, this is not close. This is the painting. I could still see every brushstroke. I closed my eyes. It was the same painting. And for a while, I kind of messed with the idea maybe I wasn't really there. Maybe I was in a nursing home somewhere. I'd had a stroke. And I just thought I was. Because, believe me, things like this happen in the movies. They happen on TV. They happen in the X-Files. They don't happen to real people. Things like this do not happen to real people. And so I tell you, I had no idea what to do. I didn't know how to deal with it. I kept closing my eyes to look at it and close and look at it. I didn't know what to do.
And then one of the art reps came over.
How do you deal with something like this? Because this is too big a coincidence to be a coincidence.
Oh, yeah. So what did the art dealer tell you?
Well, actually, I stood there for about probably 5 minutes during the painting. Finally, I got out there for a hot dog, So he come over and he said, well, I bet you was thinking, I said, look over your fireplace. And so I told him, well, I don't recognize the artist. I kept looking for a name. I didn't see a name. I said, who's the artist? So he went over and he said, I got a bio on it. So he went over to his desk and got a little bio out. Said the artist was J. Carroll Beckwith. And I read the bio, and was kind of disturbing because I could read in the bio, I could see 4 or 5 things in the bio that I'd seen my regression.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, whoa, no, Bob, go on. You're jumping to conclusions. So finally, I asked the dealer there. I says, this has been in a museum or an exhibition somewhere, hasn't it? I figured what happened.
You'd seen it.
It's an exhibition or a museum somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little blurb about the artist at the bottom, and that's how I do these things. He told me, he said, no, you haven't ever seen this thing before. He said, it's been in a private collection for years. He said, let me be honest with you. He said, Beckwith wasn't that famous, so he said, I can let this go pretty cheap. So I didn't know what to do. I just kind of mumbled something to him. Well, fortunately, the wife came downstairs from the room. I just kind of mumbled something to him, and we left. But I thought to myself that moment, I thought, well, good. Now I've got the information I need to reopen this case. I know who it was, J. Carroll Beckwith. He had the date of birth and the date of death. I thought, I'll go back to Indianapolis. I'll research this J. Carroll Beckwith. Then it'll come to me. I'll remember where I got this information from. It'll come to me. I saw it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I went back to Indianapolis, and I went to the public library again, and I found that the information about Beckwith was just nothing. There was hardly anything about
anything, yeah. He was obscure.
There was maybe a sentence to him by them in the big books on American artists, none of it in small books about American artists. There was hardly anything about him. That really bothered me. I thought, well, how can I know all these things about him? How did I know these things if there isn't anything about him?
You hadn't read anything.
The librarian at the public library says, once you go up to the art museum library, there's an art museum in Indianapolis on the north side, so they have a very extensive library about the artist. So I said, that's a good idea. So I drove up there, and I talked to the librarian, told her I wanted information on J. Carroll Beckwith, and she brought me. She had a little bit more, but not very much. Again, not very much at all, but interesting enough, the little bit more she had kept confirming things I'd seen in regression. They kept, nothing big, but little things, little dates and places and things they said about it. And it kept disturbing me. But anyway, I noticed there was a book that has a mention of Beckwith. It was a book on the American painter John Singer Sargent, who's a very famous American painter. But it turns out he and Beckwith were roommates during art school. They both went to the same art school in Paris, and they were roommates for 5 years. And the little note at the bottom of this anecdote said, this information came from the diaries of J. Carroll Beckwith, now kept by the National Academy of Design in New York City. And there was another anecdote that said this came from the unpublished autobiography of J. Carroll Beckwith, also at the National Academy of Design in New York. And so I thought to myself at that moment, because it was really starting to bother me, because everything I read, there was nothing big, but everything I read pointed the direction, yes, this is true. This is true. So far, I sit down, I remember I go home that night thinking, so far I had proved 10 different things, just this little information that what I'd seen to regression. That was really starting to bug me. So what I decided to do finally, I wanted to get hold of these diaries and autobiography, because what I was looking for, I wasn't looking for the proof. I was looking to find 1 or 2 things I had said that wasn't true. For example, I saw him drinking wine. Now, if he was a teetotaler or didn't drink wine, then it's not true. Or I had said that we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. If he'd had children, this couldn't be true.
Right,
I wanted to find 1 or 2 things that weren't true. That would show this is nothing. This is not a real memory. If you could find 1 or 2 things I had said in regression weren't true, then this is just some jumbled up mess. This is not a real memory. This is not a real past life. And so I ended up ordering the microfilm of the diaries and the autobiography. Unfortunately, he began the autobiography in the spring of 1917. He had endocarditis, which is what he died of. It's an infection of the heart valves, and he was very weak and sick. So he only got 21 pages done. So the autobiography so that didn't really help. So I looked at his diary, and unfortunately, Beckwith began his diary at age 19, made his last entry the day before he died at 65. There were 17,000 pages of diary.
And half of it you couldn't read.
Yeah, well, I thought, what do you do? What do you do with 17,000 pages?
Yeah.
Diary? What I finally did is I had hard copy made of it, and it took me 2 years, and I read every single page of his diary.
Oh.
And the problem being, of course, is that instead of finding what I was looking for, I kept looking for the little thing, the 1 or 2 things that were wrong that prove this is. Because I thought if I could find 1 or 2 things I said are wrong, this can't be a real memory. I mean, you couldn't remember. You couldn't say you didn't have children, your wife couldn't have children, and you did have children, and it's not really a true memory, is it? There's not. It couldn't be a past life thing. But unfortunately, as I kept reading the diaries, I kept finding one confirmation. For example, he did drink wine. Here's enough. He mentions in his diary a couple of times how odd people thought it was a man drinking wine, because apparently at this time men did drink whiskey. but he developed a taste for wine because he lived in
France.
Europe for so long.
Yeah.
And so the problem, I kept finding one confirmation after another. And what I did though, is before I got when I actually requested the diaries from the National Academy of Design, the New York microfilm of them, I pulled my tape out of my regression, and I had sit down and made a list of things that could be proved or not proved. The things I'd said, and I found there were 28 things I had said during regression that could be proved or disproved. And so I thought, well, I just got to find a couple of these 28 that are not true. And so I kept, but unfortunately, I kept reading the diary. I kept finding one thing after another thing. Each one would point you off the direction. But probably the real clincher was I got to it was the middle 1880s. His mother, there was two women. I knew, again, I thought to myself, if some woman close to him, very, very close to him, didn't die of a blood clot, this is not true, is it? It's not a true memory. But after reading his diaries, there's only two women that would be. That was his
wife or his mother.
Or his mother. He was very, very, very close to his mother and to his wife. So if I got the diaries in the middle 1880s, his mother was in church and dropped dead of a stroke caused by a blood clot. I think this was probably the swinging factor that drew me over to the other side. Yeah. I mean, after a while, you keep finding little small thing. For example, I had seen him when I was describing myself to Dr. Griffith. I said, I have a fancy walking stick. I said, it's not a cane, it's a fancy walking stick. Well, he makes several mentions in his diary about having a walking stick. I found a couple of photos of him with that. But these things are small. See, they're not big enough, I didn't think, to convert me. When I found the notation about his mother
and
dying
the blood
of a blood
clot.
clot,
Wow.
I think that's what swung me the opposite way. Then I thought, no, Bob, you ain't going to find a disproving factor. Now, the other thing, I told you his wife, he didn't have any children, his wife couldn't have children. Sure enough, there's a notation in his diary that his wife had a really difficult miscarriage early in their marriage. It was so bad of miscarriage, she couldn't have children after that.
Oh, that's a shame. But that verified.
And so what happened, I eventually ended up proving all 28 facts.
Even his name, Jack.
Yeah, it was kind of disturbing because again, it's one of these things where he kept finding one after another, and so after a while you have to accept that sometimes in police work, you're like murder cases, you just know that suspect A did it. You know it. You're working your case towards suspect A, but it ain't. Every piece you get is pointing towards something else.
Yeah.
Eventually, you got to stop this case and wait a minute.
Got to go where the evidence leads you.
Well, B did it. Well, that's the way of this case. Eventually, I started out to prove this is not true, and after a while, it's not. I had to stop the case and realize, no, Bob, it's not what you proved. You proved just the opposite. You proved it was true. This was Beckwith's life. And the point about the thing is, even if you'd had any information about Beckwith, you're not going to find how his mother died, this kind of, the things I knew about the walking stick and the drinking wine and what his mother died of. You're not going to find that in any kind of little blurb or anything about an artist. These are all very intimate facts about his life.
You were lucky to stumble across those diaries.
Yeah. The thing is, his diaries have never been published. There's no book. There's no books about Beckwith. There's no movies about him. Because if I'd have said I was Renoir or Van Gogh or someone, everybody said, yeah, you know this stuff because you saw it in a movie, you read the book. That's why you know stuff. There's no books about Beckwith. There's no articles. There's nothing about him. But he simply wasn't that famous an artist. He wasn't very talented. He made a decent living, but he didn't make any. He never painted any paintings that would be called masterpieces. There's no paintings anyone would recognize immediately as being a Beckwith. He wasn't that good. And he spent most of his life painting portraits because that paid the most. Interesting enough, I had told Dr. Griffith during the regression that I'm painting portraits. I hate painting portraits, but I need the money. He said that probably 1,000 times in his diary, how much he hated painting portraits.
That's
but he needed the money.
So if you hadn't been lucky enough to come across that diary, you'd still be driving yourself crazy now.
That was the selling factor because the problem about the way I feel about past lives is you really can't prove a past life unless the person you say you were is so obscure. There's no way you could actually stumble on information about him in this life.
Yep, higher likelihood.
Yeah,
and the flip side of that is most people like that don't leave much information about themselves.
True.
People really obscure. They might be a few notations, birth and death and marriage. That'd be it. I was very fortunate that Beckwith was a very, very avid diary keeper. Like I said, he started at 19 and finished just a day before he died.
Yeah, very lucky to find them. Bob, let me ask you, when you were in New Orleans and you spotted the painting, why didn't you tell your wife at that point?
Well, my wife was really funny. She did not want me to go see Dr. Griffith. She thought it was a stupid idea.
I know, but you'd already been there, and this was really good proof that there was something to this.
No, because at the moment I did, and I've had a number of people ask me also, why didn't I buy the painting?
Yeah, that was another thing.
At the moment, I thought this was a painting I had seen somewhere in this life. I had just forgotten I'd seen it. I read a little blurb about the artist below the painting, and that's all it was. There's nothing supernatural. There's nothing otherworldly about this. And so I didn't say anything, but at the moment I didn't believe it was anything. I believed at that moment this painting, I had seen it somewhere in this life. I had forgotten it, but your subconscious mind never forgets anything. I thought during the hypnosis, my subconscious mind brought up this memory about this painting and spouted the information about the artist from the little bio you'd seen on him when you saw the painting. That's all there was to it. And that's why I didn't say anything at the time, because I really didn't think it was anything.
Yeah.
At least anything significant.
And what does your wife think of it all now?
She still doesn't believe it. I mean,
She still doesn't.
As I talk about my book, when I finally confronted her with what I'd found and everything, she didn't believe it. She was total unbeliever. And matter of fact, she suggested that she investigated. My wife, by the way, was also a police detective. She was a detective for many years at the police department, and probably one of the best detectives I've ever met. She's an extremely thorough, very good detective. And she said, no, Bob, you only know about Beckwith and stuff. You've seen him somewhere in this life. You've seen information from him somewhere. You just forgot about it. She said, let me investigate. I'll find it before the information is about Beckwith. And I was really glad to hear her say that, because one of my biggest admonishments I used to give my detectives when I was the head of homicide was, don't get emotionally involved in your cases. Because when you get emotionally involved in your cases, you get tunnel vision.
Right.
Yep, you make mistakes.
You can't see things. So and believe me, in this case, I was very emotional involved. I knew it. And so I thought, good, I would like to have a second check on my work. Let her look and see. And so she did a very thorough research on Beckwith, and she couldn't come up with anything more than I'd found. She found nothing, absolutely nothing more than I'd found.
But Bob, what about her regressions? She experienced a couple of past lives too, because she saw Dr. Griffith.
Yeah, finally, I when I was doing this, I finally talked her into it herself. She didn't want to do it first. Believe me, it took me a lot of talking. But I thought if I could get her to do it, to go there and see the past life regression, then maybe she would understand what I was going through. So I finally talked her into it. I think at first she thought if she wins, she'd be as crazy as she thought I was. But I talked her into going. But unfortunately, again, her lives were so far back. Again, I don't know if you could find any proof of it or not. She didn't really see any significant. I mean, she saw some events, she saw some lies, but nothing where you could dig up facts about them.
It was easier for her to dismiss
it. I think she became convinced afterwards that it was just all her imagination.
Yeah.
That's all it was. I don't think she believed they were true. As I didn't. If you read my book, you know I didn't either. After the regression, I thought they were just my imagination too.
Oh. Well, Bob, we are just about at the end of the show. Would you like to give out your website and where we can buy your book?
Yeah, my book's on Amazon or Barnes Noble, any other website. If you type my name into Amazon.com, my website will come right up.
And everybody who's listening, this is really a fascinating read. You must get a copy of this book.
It is an excellent book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, Robert Snow. And we really thank you, Bob, for joining us
thank you so much. Very interesting.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. All right. You have a good evening.
You too. Thank you again.
Have a good evening, Bob. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. I guess that's the end of another episode of Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. And, of course, Craig Mosier with the Graveyard Shift is coming right up.
And everyone, thank you for listening, and have a good evening.